hope everybody survived the Stormageddon and that if trees fell at your house, they managed to miss your house. We're really excited, all those of you who are able to join us tonight. So welcome each and every one of you. So tonight I am interviewing Capital Crimes member Byron Birtcher about his latest novel, Reckoning. Byron is the winner of the Silver Falchion Award for Hard Latitudes, winner of the Killer Nashville Reader's Choice Award for South California Purples, and Best Book of the Year Award for Fistful of Rain. He has also been nominated for the Nero Award, the Lefty, the Forward Indie, the Claymore, and the Pacific Northwest Spotted Owl Awards. Byron's writing has been hailed as the real deal by Publisher Weekly, fast-paced and engaging by Booklist, and solid, fluid, and thrilling by Kirkus. Best-selling author Don Winslow has said, "You want to read Barron's books, then you want to live in them." Learn more about Barron by following him on Facebook. Good evening, Barron. Thank you for joining us.
I am thrilled to be here and to have been invited to be here and be a member of this august organization.
Oh, thank you. Well, we are glad to have you as one of our members. And as we were saying before, the rest of you all joined us at Capital Crimes. We have been blessed by a plethora of wonderful authors. We truly have been. So, okay, this book was amazing. I just, you're a new author to me. I would not have picked up the book before because I had not met you and hadn't heard about you. And now I'm find myself scouring to find all the other books you've written. So this is your third book about Sheriff Ty Dawson, right?
That is correct.
Okay. So in book one, just to bring you all up to speed, okay, in book one, Southern California Purple, which Google originally told me was a song written and sung by Robert Lamb for the rock band Chicago. Southern California Purple was a winner of the Killer Nashville 2018 Reader's Choice Award. And this is where we were introduced to Sheriff Ty Dawson. The year is 1973, and the last of American soldiers are returning home from Vietnam, often shouted down and spat upon by protesters, while the first toxic cracks of public mistrust had begun to appear at the highest levels of government. The American Indian movement has entered into a bloody occupation of Wounded Knee. Gas shortages have pushed the economy into deep recession, and violent civil unrest is captured in living color and televised nightly on the evening news. But rural Meriwether County, tucked away amid sweeping river valleys and serrated mountain ridges of southern Oregon, have been left largely untouched by time until now. Then this was followed by the second Sheriff Dawson mystery, A Fistful of Rain, which was also a winner, 2019 Best Book of the Year at Killer Nashville. Ty Dawson is now sheriff of Oregon's Meriwether County and is ready to put a trying year behind him, but he is afforded no such luck. And the country still coming to grips with the Vietnam War, Watergate, and Charles Manson, the black sheep of the family. Ty's neck of the woods isn't safe from the turmoil, especially when a commune of young so-called hippies springs up out of nowhere. A longtime local sheep rancher accuses the Rainbow Ranch residents of livestock theft, putting Ty in the middle of a culture clash. Which brings us to book 3, Reckoning, the one we're talking about tonight. This story follows Ty Dawson, small-time sheriff with big city problems, as he struggles to keep modernicity at bay in rural Meriwether County. But a standoff between the federal government and cattlemen, a murdered Portland detective, and a swamp of corruption isn't making his life any easier. Well, okay, now that you all are up to speed, Barron, would you like to talk to us a little bit about Reckoning?
Well, you've done such a magnificent job. I don't know how I can add to it, but it is a series that is very dear to my heart. I started out I had another series prior to this that was a hard-boiled PI series that was set in Hawaii, and there were 4 books and a standalone that was kind of related to it that were associated with that. And when I moved, I lived there for about 15 years. And as I was living there, I was writing that. When I moved to Oregon about a dozen years ago, uh, I was fascinated by the culture here and the history here, and in sort of examining my own history as a Southern California guy that was raised in the 1970s. Uh, it became a real catalyst for me to want to write a story, really more from the perspective of my dad's generation, because it dawned on me that the challenges of raising children, I think, especially teenage children, when the Vietnam War was looming, a lot of social change, riots at colleges. You mentioned the American Indian movement. There was a lot of social, civil, and political unrest everywhere, and mistrust of the government. There was just so much going on that the earth must have felt as though it was moving under their feet. So that was really the catalyst for wanting to write Ty Dawson as a character, a 40-year-old man with a college-age daughter who is trying to make sense of his a changing world in his very rural community.
Well, for those of you who have not had the pleasure, Baron, would you mind reading a little bit from Reckoning?
I'd be honored. So this is from the beginning of Reckoning. So no spoilers. No child is brought into this world with any knowledge of true evil. This they learn with the passage of time. In my experience as a sheriff and as a rancher, I have found this precept to be true. Time passes nevertheless, even when it passes slowly. Here in rural southern Oregon, sometimes it seemed like it hadn't moved at all, advancing without touching the county except with glancing blows. That is, until the day caught up with all of us, and it came down like a goddamn hammer.
You guys, I have to admit, this book, I sat down, it hooked me right from the start and didn't let me go until the very, very end. So, okay, so this is just your opening lines into Reckoning, and then it just takes off and goes crazy from that point. Now, you mentioned Ty Dawson is your second series. So before him, when you were still living in Hawaii, there was Mike Travis, Roadhouse Blues, Ruby Tuesday, Angel Falls, and Hard Latitudes were the books in that series. Can you tell us a little bit, before we dig deeper into Ty Dawson, tell us a little bit about Mike Travis. Who was he?
Mike was a retired cop who moved from California, which is where I might have mentioned before. I was born and raised in California. It was rural back then where I lived, and it doesn't look the same anymore when I visit. But he moved from an area that I was very familiar with to an area that I wanted to be familiar with, and that was Hawaii. And he was moving away from a career as a homicide detective and having been made rather infamous because of a couple of cases that had sort of gone poorly. So he moves to Hawaii and attempts to start a new life. But as things happen to former cops that try to start new lives, he can't escape it, and trouble finds him. And I really found it fun and interesting to take the Hawaiian motif and overlay a really dark and hard-boiled PI vibe over the top of it. And it was really fun. It was a great juxtaposition, and I enjoyed it a lot. It got a lot of good critical traction, and it was great.
One of the things I noticed in the Ty Dawson book and just hearing you describe the Mike Travis book, it feels as if you've done a really wonderful job with setting and actually making the setting as powerful as one of your characters. You know, when you do you take a hard boiled driven PI and you place him in laid back Hawaii, you know, and you take Ty Dawson, who was haunted by Vietnam, and put him in the beautiful land and landscape of Oregon. How difficult is that for you to create, where you make those settings as alive as the people who live in them?
That is a wonderful compliment. I thank you. That's a very kind thing to say. I love the places that I live. I think most of us do when we're fortunate enough to want to live. And I love to try to stretch myself to see if I can describe it adequately when it touches me, because nowhere is completely static. So there's always something to talk about. There's a smell, there's a look to the sky, there's the shadows on the ground, the seasons look different from one place to another. So place is a beautiful background, but I think that place also has a lot to do with who the people are that live there. And it really colors the way they speak, the food you eat, the clothes you wear, your attitudes about outsiders and insiders and locals and visitors and all of the different things that happen in the places where we all live. It's not unique to Hawaii. It's not unique to Oregon, California, or anywhere else. And to me, I think people are the heart of any story, whether it's a crime story or anything. To me, the people come first. The characters have to be engaging first, and they will tell the story that they will tell. I often say, I hope I don't step on any toes here, but I can often tell when a plot thread has been imagined, and then characters are pulled in order to tell that bit of story. And sometimes it doesn't fit the overall arc of where you are or what else is happening in the story. So I like to put people first, so that the story tends to tell itself, I think.
Well,
That was long-winded. I'm sorry.
no, no, no. We've got an hour. You can be as long-winded as you want to be. But I think you can tell when there are people who do research via Google, and then there are people who do research by actually going. And I think you can tell when a writer has actually lived and loved the places where they're setting their characters. I think it adds to a level of authenticity.
I'm glad to hear you say that. I think so too.
It absolutely does. Okay. So your protagonist resumes place them at the tail end of the Greatest Generation. So coming from there, how did you build your two main characters in Reckoning?
Well, they are people that I knew from growing up. I was raised in South Orange County in San Juan Capistrano, way back when. I think there were literally 300 people in the valley at the time. So it was very, very small. And Dana Point was a little surfing community. And but where we lived, it was cattle, orange groves, and strawberry fields. And it was all very, very agricultural. And it was a lifestyle. And so I was raised with horses and people that were people of the land for the most part. It wasn't all real estate developers and contractors then. So the two main guys, Ty Dawson and the rancher Casey Sheridan, that sort of formulate the initial narrative are archetypes of people that I knew well, but I knew them through the eyes of a child, through the eyes of a teenager, as formidable grown-ups that get out of the way if they started coming at you.
They had that kind of power.
Well, they all seemed to back then. There were a lot of cowboy hats and cowboy boots.
Well, not just because they were bigger than you were, but I think there was an air of respect that our elders had then that I'm not always sure is true today. I mean, I said kids aren't afraid of grown-ups anymore. I don't know that I wasn't afraid of the grown-ups, but I respected them, or I didn't know them. And if I didn't know them, I stayed away till I found out if they were safe or not. But there was a level of respect that we were just instilled with, you know, usually by the back of my grandmother's hand to my head if I didn't get it any other way. But I think that that's somehow been lost, and I think that it's not to our good, to the detriment overall, because
Yeah, it's all part of the cultural change that I think began right then. But specifically speaking of the characters in Reckoning, we had on one side a cattle rancher who was a very crusty, tough guy, very good heart. These aren't dangerous men, but tough guys. And then on the other hand, the other side of us was a farmer who raised, strawberries and lettuce and so forth. And he was a tough guy too. And it just seemed to me, I was very reminiscent, I guess, as I was writing these guys, because many of their characteristics came through, and it was I write them fondly because I now appreciate them as a grown-up myself. I appreciate them differently than I did as a teenager.
And I think too the pendulum swinging back and forth, the upset of the culture at that time where a lot of the people like Ty Dawson and Sheridan were feeling like the world was shaking out from underneath them, and the foundation that had always been there, the bedrock that they thought they could build on and they believed would stay forever, that was how their world was shifting and starting to crumble. And I think there's some of that a lot of people are feeling today, is that, there's certain things that we just never thought would happen, and we're watching them play out on CNN.
I hear that a lot from readers, and I feel it myself. I think we all kind of do. Those of us who have lived through that whole arc, that time period. But I hear from readers often that here we are reading about the 1970s and the things that are going on and the things that are really of concern to just day-to-day people, economic, political, etc. And they mirror very closely the very same concerns that concern us all now. And it's not about party, and it's not about red or blue or any of that stuff. It's just getting up in the morning and trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, the next question I had is, your stories are time machines that take us back to the 1970s. What about that decade resonates with you? And I think we've kind of started going on that, unless there's more you want to add to it, about what about that period of the 70s, that decade where your stories are set, is resonating with you?
I just think familiarity and to revisit it nostalgically on one hand, and then historically on the other, and to try to marry those two things, because they don't always melt. The way I remembered it is not necessarily the way, when I do the research, the way it actually came down. And I find that to be a very educational process for my own self.
Right. the way we remember it versus the way it really was. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, the so you've got some books out there now. What do your five-star fans like most about your writing?
Uh, wow. Um, I love my readers. They're the best people. Uh, First of all, because they read my books, so automatically. Uh, but what I appreciate that they appreciate are the things that we've kind of already touched upon. I like it when people can name the characters by name and they will speak about them as though they know them. And I love hearing that, gosh, I was really sorry when the book was over because I kind of miss those people. And it's funny because every time I finish writing a book, I bet every author feels this way. But when I finish writing a book, I miss these people that I've been with for months now, writing this manuscript. And now you type the end, and gosh, it's going to be a while before we get together again, and I'm going to miss hanging out with them. So that's what I like. That's what I hear most often, and I hear a lot of very, very kind things about the poetic nature of the descriptions of some things. And I like that a lot too. That means a lot to me. I came up as a songwriter and a lyricist and stuff, and that touches me in a different way. I appreciate that.
Yeah, all the feels. I mean, when you create a character that a person reading them feels like if they were to walk past them in the mall, they would recognize them because they've become so real.
Well, what a kind way to say that. Thank you. I think I'd recognize them. I know that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I we have rambled on for 30 minutes already. And I'm seeing all kinds of questions in the chat. Richard, do you want to toss out a few of the questions?
Let me unmute here.
Okay.
Yeah, your story exudes authenticity. How were you able to zero in on the era so effectively?
Um, I was there. A lot of this just comes from I was there and I remember it. I remember how I felt. But again, filtered through the eyes of a teenager. So when I go back to research what the reality was, sometimes I'm confirmed in the way that I felt. Sometimes I feel sort of silly for having been all wrought up about something that I might have been not so right about. So I don't know. Hopefully that kind of weaves itself into the narrative.
I want to take a little bit of the questions privilege card right now. What's that on tap beside you there?
Oh, I'm in I call this the writer's bar. It's a little bar up here in my house. That is Bridgeport Brewing Company. It's an ESB tap. And I'd pour you one, but I can't.
Yeah, I know. I have a virtual beer with you. Yeah.
Please do.
What were some of the most interesting things you learned about Oregon in the late 70s in your research?
One of the most interesting things I learned this time around was there was a level of corruption here politically and in the police force that lasted a decade. I did not realize that it fomented a congressional set of hearings in the actually first half of the 60s. So it's a little anachronistic the way that I used it, but it lasted for decades, the stink from it. But many people went to jail. People lost their jobs, and political personnel fell from grace. It was really kind of a mess that actually probably has roots all the way back to being shanghaied back in the late 1800s in the port of Portland.
Well, on your the two protagonists, how did you handle the writing the differences between them? I think Ty and the other protagonist is not specific. I wonder if they're talking about
Well, the rancher Casey Sheridan.
Casey.
I'm sorry. The question.
Well, how'd you handle writing differences between them? Because the characters are both ranchers, but they're very, there's differences between them.
Yes. I think in my mind, they were very well articulated characters before I started writing them. I knew who they were because, as I said, they're loosely based on people that I knew. So there's a mentality that goes with being a cattle rancher and the problems that you have that go along with livestock and the theft of your livestock and the veterinary issues and just ranch stuff. Farmers have a different set of problems that come from different places, and many of them cross over. They share land-oriented problems and water-oriented problems, but other kinds of problems are a little different. So for me, I knew those men, and I knew what they were like, and I hopefully imbued the characters in the book with a little reality from my experience.
Well, here's a very optimistic note. You've got Knife River is coming out in April. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. That'll be the fourth book in the series, and I'm very excited about. We're always excited about our newest book that gets to be released into the wild, but it picks up right where Reckoning leaves off in terms of time frame and in terms of where all the characters, where you leave them. So it'll just be a continuation. New set of troubles that are, let me answer this a different way. I mentioned earlier that I came from the music business back when. One of the main very popular studios of the early 70s was a place called Caribou Ranch, which that's where Chicago, hence the borrowing of the book title, the band Chicago and John Lennon and all kinds of people recorded up there. And it was a resort studio in the middle of Nederland, Colorado, which was just a little outside of Colorado Springs. People would go there. The musicians would hole up there for a month or so, record their stuff, take their tapes home, and they've got an album. So the whole notion of a resort studio was sort of born there. And many issues arose, as you can imagine, when you've got people from, rock stars from all over the world descending on a little tiny town in the mountains. And some of those are fun and exciting, and some of those are WTF. So I borrowed part of that as a story thread. It's not the main thing, but it propels part of the story of Knife River. And another story thread involves poaching. And they come together. So they don't sound like they would, but they do.
That note, how does your background as a songwriter and lyricist help you write?
To be honest, I have no idea except from just practice. And I like the sound and the economy of lyrics. I'm touched by lyrics, and I'm touched by poetry, and I'm touched by the fact that you have to say a lot in a very small space. And it is largely due to vocabulary. And I like the challenge of it. I like seeing if I can do it. So, and when it's done right, when I listen to somebody like Joni Mitchell or Dan Fogelberg, or Bob Dylan. There's dozens. Tim Hardin. There's there are. You listen to certain phrases and couplets and what have you, and you think, "How did you say that?" Well, that's what we're all searching for, I think, when we're sitting down to write our thing. And we all have different styles and different places that we draw from. But for me, that's where mine comes from, I think. It's just the desire to not necessarily make it pretty, but I want to make it different. So that I want to say it in a way that you've never heard it said before. That's what I want to do.
And I think that in once you've said it in that way, you want us to feel differently about it. It's the same words. We all use the same alphabet, but you put them together and the words touch you. When certain authors wield them, they're a weapon, they're a caress, they're a slap, and you feel it in that. And I was just thinking, when you said that your background was musical, Jeffrey Deaver in his books XOXO, which is kind of a takeoff on the Taylor Swift type character who has a stalker, he actually wrote a soundtrack that went with the book. And so because you have a musical background, is there any possibility you might ever consider doing something like that with one of your books?
I've toyed with the idea, and I've talked it over with some musician friends, all of whom, it's so funny. I always think they're going to say, "Not a chance, no, thank you." They all say, "Oh, I'm all in. What do you do? When do you want to do that?"
Yeah.
And then I think, well, I don't know. I'd love to try it, but I don't know that I have the courage for that. That takes a lot of courage to do that. And it adds another element to the reader's experience, that part of what we do as storytellers is we're creating an environment that happens here. This is why, we love the book and hated the movie, because it wasn't realized in front of us the way that we had it in our heads. So I keep debating with myself as to how much information do I want to give when I cross a line that starts to take away the fun for the reader? The part that you're putting together for your own self.
I don't know. I think that creatives, which we all are as writers, and I think readers on different levels are part of that whole thing. The more sensory input you can give me, I think that's why it's a totally different experience listening to a book versus reading a book, and you're right. It's one step. How the reader reads also affects how I see the characters that the writer has written. Okay. Whereas without that, it's all me. It's all in here. It's what I'm creating and only what I'm creating. But then I listen to a good reader and suddenly this character has a different shape and feeling than they had when it was just in my head. And I think a score that went with that, which is why scores are so powerful in music, adds another layer, just another layer. I know.
That's an excellent point. You're emboldening me. I do know that every time I imagine it, it's more of an ambient kind of a thing. It's not songs so much as an ambience. I do one other thing, and I will point this out because a handful of readers will DM me or they'll email me or whatever. I tend to use song titles not only as book titles, but as section headings or what have you throughout the book. And the reason is, when I'm writing these things, particularly that are set in the 70s, that is all I will listen to during the period that I'm writing, is I'm listening to the music of the time, because I kind of want to stay in that zone. And I want to remember what that felt like when that was all there was on the radio. We didn't think of it as 70s music. We thought of it as music. So I'm trying to put myself back there. So I will drop those in as little cues, if you will, throughout the book. So there's a certain kind of a playlist that builds itself if if you were so inclined. You could build yourself a little playlist to listen to as you experience the books.
Yeah, because music is so evocative of a time. I mean, you hear that song that they played at your senior prom, and you are there.
Oh, you're right back there, sure.
Yeah, So the powerful of transporting, using the music to transport a person along with the words, I would think would be a very powerful thing. I really hope that you'll consider it, because I get excited at the idea of music not just written for a piece, but that the author had a hand in it. It's the movie. It's the movie where the writer had no input into the movie, and the readers walk away going, "Which book was that? That was not the book I read."
Yeah, what just happened?
Yeah, exactly. Versus the movie that the writer was an active, integral part of, and it's like, yes, that's exactly how I imagined it. It was going to be just like that. So I think that having the author create the song or be part of the creation of the song that went with the book would be extremely powerful.
Well, Penny, I feel emboldened now.
Good. My work here is done. My work.
Thank you, Capital Crimes. Thank you, Penny.
May I weigh in here for a second?
Please.
I wanted to say that one of the things that is great about Barron's work is that he doesn't make the mistake that many authors do of throwing dialogue up right at the beginning, when the reader hasn't yet gotten to know the characters, and therefore the reader, if they read dialogue early on, forms an opinion of what that voice would be like. And then when the characters are developed later on, there's a conflict of what's in your head and what's on the page. Barron is scrupulous in his application of description of the place, the people, the time, and everything else. So when you get to dialogue, it rings true to the image that he's already set.
Well, thank you.
If I could mention, I was particularly impressed by your wildlife and the habitats. You discuss them in the book. I mean, several different species of owls, the harriers, and all specific to the habitats they're found in, along with the pines and the oak woodlands. And I thought that, have you got a background in that, or is that just your research?
It's where I live, to tell you the truth. I live on a little ranch here at the north end of the Willamette Valley, and all of those critters live here. In fact, you may be able to hear some owls. There's some that are starting to, I don't know, nest or fool around. I don't know what they're doing out there, but they're making a racket. But because I'm curious, I do like to look up, like, who's making that noise, and what are you doing?
I got a program for you. I'll send it. Did you live in Kona? And if so, how much of Kona was in that area that did you put in your first series?
I did live in Kona. I grew coffee there. I lived there for 15 blissful years. I might still live there, except that I had a grandchild born on the mainland, and that was just too far away. And so we moved here, and I haven't looked. I don't regret it for a nanosecond. However, when I was there, I loved every second of it, and I knew that because I lived in a teeny tiny little community, you better get it right. So the first thing I did when I moved there, and when I knew that I was going to write crime fiction, I had a conversation with the police captain that ran the whole district of Kona, and he became one of my very closest friends, actually. He'd pop over to the house, and we'd sit around, and at the time I smoked. We'd sit around smoking cigarettes, and he'd tell me funny stories about goofy things that had happened. But Kona, very much, it was my goal to have it resonate with the people that lived there, so that it wasn't like a Google search description of a postcard.
Question about your favorite book and what authors do you enjoy reading the most?
Oh my gosh! Well,
yeah, tough one.
Some of them are right here. I'll go with the classics, like James Crumley. If you like really hard boiled. Love James Crumley. Thomas H. Cook. If you're not familiar with him, he's fabulous. He's won a couple Edgar Awards back in the day. God, see, now I'm going to start forgetting people. Reed Farrell Coleman is a poet. Jim Latwell, I don't know if you know him. He's awfully good. Bruce Coffin writes great police procedurals. Matt Coyle, PI stuff. Some of it is so interesting because when you do get to to meet some of your heroes, your literary heroes, it really is kind of daunting because they're as smart as many of them are every bit as smart as you think they are.
And isn't that nice when you find that out? That they are just that clever, just that
Meredith,
just that.
I neglected to mention him.
Yeah,
Rick,
yes, the Rick, that
right?
guy. James says your check is in the mail. All those little funny guys. But so here you are. Okay, you've got 8 novels in print, and the 9th coming out in April, and so it's safe to say you've kind of hit your stride as a writer. So, 2 questions: what are the key things you now know about the craft that you didn't know when you first started book 1? And what things do you still, there's so much, I don't even feel like I can talk about Reckoning because you have done a masterful job of twists and turns. And there's so many things that in the book that I can't even begin to talk about. Sorry, you guys will just have to get the book because there'd be spoilers all over the place. Because every time you turn around, it's not what you think it was. It's something totally different. So, I could only hope one day to be able to be that masterful in leading my reader on this path. Okay, so what are the things that you look around and you say, gosh, I really wish I could do fill in the blank like this other author? That's what I'm striving for. That's where I feel like our book last time, he wrote Dual Timelines. Oh my gosh, he did such a wonderful job with that. But that is a unique talent in and of itself, So what are those kinds of things that you still want to learn? And what do you now know? What do you think you've got? I've got that. I can do that, and I don't worry about it. But this other stuff, I'm still learning.
I'm still. Thank you very much. Those were some of the kindest things anyone's ever said to me. So thank you very much. I'm going to replay this for my wife and see. So thanks.
Happy
Your
Father's
check's
Day.
available.
Go on.
When I wrote my first manuscript, I didn't read any how-to stuff. I just started writing. And I came from the music business. I didn't come from the law enforcement area or any of that stuff. And I thought, you really don't have any business writing this. You don't know what you're talking about, which is probably where, then just write about people, because you know about people. You are one. You've been one all your life, mostly. So if you're an observer of human nature, then you can write kind of anything. So it gave me confidence, I think, after the first couple of books, not to be too self-conscious about whether I know what police do when they arrive at a crime scene. In fact, I've learned, don't write that scene, because I really don't know about that. I'll leave that to the guys that did it, because I'll just do it wrong. There are things that those guys might get wrong about my world. So I think they steer clear of it too. And for me, I guess what I've learned is write about people and be true to the different kinds of people that there are, because everybody's motivated by something. Everybody wants something. And in almost every scene, in almost every situation, if you sat down at a restaurant right after this, you could look around and everybody in that room, everybody wants something, and it's not all the same thing. And we're all in some way angling to get it. So That's what I've learned. Write that and keep your eyes and ears open, and people will show you things. And the dual timeline deal, I love. You asked about what can you learn to do that like somebody else. There are some people that do nested narratives, is what I've come to call them. But I think I first saw it. Maybe it was T. Jefferson Parker who does it brilliantly. Don Winslow did it way back when a couple of times. Lots of people have done it over the years, but not everybody can do it well. And I love when you've got a storyline, storyline A, and then storyline B and storyline C, and you think, what in the heck do these have to do with anything? And everyone tells authors, trust your reader. Okay, well, I'm going to tell readers, trust your authors too. We wrote this thing the way we wrote it for a reason. And most of them didn't get out into the wild without having other people read it and comment upon it. So trust that you're going someplace. And those intertwining stories will weave together into a string or into a rope that is fun and engaging and interesting. And that's what I keep wanting to get better and better and better at that.
Chris has for a little more example of what is a nested narrative.
Well, for example, good question. That's kind of a goofy, silly description. Sorry. In Reckoning, for example, there's 3 different stories happening, but 2 major stories. And one of them is the obvious one that has to do with a cattle rancher that's really having some legal trouble with his property that snowballs into all kinds of other troubles. There's another story that's happening that has nothing to do with that man or those cows, seemingly. And there's a Portland police officer who's found as the victim of an apparent suicide at a fishing camp miles away from where this other rancher has his troubles. And Ty Dawson happens to have to deal with both because he lives in a very large county. But that's what a nested narrative is this story is telling one story, this is telling another, and then you find that there's a kind of a Venn diagram where they overlap, and then something else overlaps, and what do you know? All kinds of stuff overlap, and it becomes that 6 degrees of separation kind of a thing that happens in real life all the time.
I know authors hate to tie things up nicely at the end with a bow, but as a reader, I love it. I love it when you go, oh, so that's what all that was about. And Reckoning did that for me. At the end, it was kind of like, so that's what really was going on. And you did it very well. Guys, you have got to read this book. I promise you, it's well worth the read. And I'm going to go back and read the first 2 books now because I enjoyed this one so much. So we were talking about, I said, what are some of the common themes that run through the stories you tell? And just from listening to you today, I was talking the other day about how your main character in Reckoning, Ty Dawson, is kind of addicted to doing the right thing. He can't not do the right thing, even if it hurts other people and himself. That's just what he's got to do. But listening to you talk today, I'm also seeing in this series, as well as hear you talk about the first series with Mike Travis, there seems to be culture clashes all over the place.
I think there always have been, and they've either been unacknowledged or, we have to remember that today it is not only a 24-hour news cycle, there's nowhere you can look where there's not some source of something coming at you all the time.
Uh-oh.
something coming at you constantly in terms of information. And I had read one time years ago, this statistic's going to be inaccurate, but the theme will be correct, that the average person in the 18th century consumed the amount of information that they would consume in an average year is what we consume in less than an average day. They just didn't have that. There's just not newspapers, and you got your information much more slowly. So we didn't know about wars in Cameroon or what's going on in Libya, or you wouldn't know for the war could be over by the time you heard about it. Not now. So it seems that there is a tremendous amount of turmoil. And what I ask myself sometimes is there actually more, or do we just know about it faster?
Yeah.
Not that it matters, but it's an interesting conundrum. It's an interesting question to sort of address.
Has it always been there? It was happening without our knowledge.
Yeah.
Happening without our notice.
I don't know what's going on in New Guinea, but you can find out now.
Yeah, you can. You can. And I think that part of that instant gratification, remember you'd sit around at a table with your friends and somebody would say, who was the actor in such and such? And you would all spend 40 minutes trying to figure out who that was. Well, now you just pick up your smartphone and you Google it and you go, oh, it was so-and-so, so-and-so. Right. It's that immediate feeding of our hunger. And I don't,
which is another great,
good.
It's another great thing about someone asked earlier about writing in the 1970s. It is such a liberating thing to write in the 1970s because there isn't any of that. And people actually have to talk to each other. And people, if you want to go see something, you got to get in your car and go.
Oh my God, actually talking to people.
Yeah, how about that?
That's a scary thought.
Weird.
Okay, so the question is, what hours is the writer's bar open?
The writer's bar is open whenever I'm here. Whenever I'm at home, it is open. Call first. There is a podcast. This I had no intention. This is not a plug, but it's going to turn into one. I do have a podcast that I do from time to time. It's purely whimsical in terms of when they happen, but I do. I will let you know on Facebook and on my author page, on the Writer's Bar page. But I like to have people come and virtually sit with me at the Writer's Bar. We'll have a drink for an hour and talk like you and I are talking right now, mostly about craft, sometimes about other stuff. And Jim Latwell's been on a couple of times, I think. Always good fun. It's fun to talk with colleagues that are not only articulate, but know their terrain and are comfortable to articulate it. Because that's not always easy either. That's not a given.
No. It's this whole tribal thing. I mean, I think we all seek like minds, and we want to connect with other people who are part of our tribe. So, okay. So I want to, before I go, if we can put how we can contact Baron on Facebook, or how we can find him, how we can friend him. And I just want to mention before I go the books. Okay. So, reading Baron's books, there's the first Mike Travis series, Roadhouse Blues, Ruby Tuesday, Angel Falls, and Hard Latitudes. And then there are the Ty Dawson books. I'm going back. So it's the first one was Purple.
South California Purple.
There, you do it because you know them.
Fistful of Rain, the newest, Reckoning, and the forthcoming Knife River.
And Knife River is coming out when?
April 23rd. Available now. And I should also mention there's this is kind of a fun artifact. There's a standalone I wrote that is called Rain Dogs, that straddles that. I don't know how to say this exactly. It straddles both series. It is kind of a bridge between both, and readers of both series will recognize it, but it doesn't. It's not in boldface. It is also set in the 70s, but you'll see what I mean. So they are loosely connected. There's an arc between the two series, that is.
Okay. All right. So take the time to read Barron's books, especially if you haven't checked out Reckoning. You definitely want to check it out. I'd probably be saying the same thing about the other two books if I'd had a chance to read them first, but I haven't yet. So definitely read Reckoning. I can personally recommend it, that it's time well spent. And this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Barron, for joining us and spending time with us today.
I've enjoyed it thoroughly. I just feel so blessed to be a part of this group. And as I said before we actually went on the air here, you've got more talent in capital crimes than I've seen in any given room of writers.
Well, we feel very blessed.
I'm privileged to be a part of it. So thanks for having me.
Feel very blessed to have such a wonderful group. And so thank the rest of you guys for coming out and spending time with us tonight, joining us and chatting away. And I hope you're all hard at work on thinking about your short stories for the anthology. We're expecting to get up so many short stories that are so wonderful that we make our judges' heads spin.